Today I want to talk about a story about freedom. Well, hello brothers and sisters, welcome to Mission Zero. If this is your first time here, my name is Shawn and this is FlashBack Friday, the show where we take stories from the past and apply them to the present to create a better future. The story that I'd like us to talk about today comes out of the book of Colossians, which is an epistle that the Apostle Paul wrote to the city of Colosse. And the story we're going to particularly take comes out of Colossians chapter 2, and it's verse 20, in which he says, and I'm going to paraphrase here, "Why? If you have been freed in Christ and believe in Christ, do you insist on chaining yourself to the laws of man?" Now, he goes on to talk about the laws of man, and what he means by the laws of man is the laws of the Pharisees. See, there's the law that Moses had gotten from God, that he wrote down, and the books of the kings and the prophets, and those were constituted as kind of, we call them the Old Testament today, but they were the collected law. And the problem with the law is it requires some hand-holding to get through. It's very academic, very dense stuff. And so the rabbis of the Jewish synagogues would write these lessons on top of the law to kind of clarify the law, but in so doing, they would create new laws that they would then subject the people to. And in fact, by the time that Jesus was born, there were hundreds of such laws that were not part of the message that God gave to Moses or the prophets. They were just these interpretations that were given by men to inflict order upon people. And they weren't created out of malice. They were just created out of, well, I think this is right. I'm going to teach you guys that this is right, and so this is the way we should behave. And once it's agreed it's the way we should behave, we make it a law, right? It's a punishable thing now, because this is what you got to do. What Paul says is all of those laws about what you can't touch or can't taste or can't do just perish. They're temporary. They're things that show you can have an iron will and you can force yourself not to do something. But that's not the reality of what God expects from us. It's not the freedom that we were given in Christ. And so what Paul is saying here is, if you truly understand the message of Jesus, if you understand his life and his example, then you'll know what you can't do. It's irrelevant. It's not about what you're not allowed to do, what you're forbidden to do, because those things change. Maybe you're not allowed to eat this kind of meat because you're a vegetarian and that's disturbing to you to eat that meat. But that doesn't mean meat eating in general is prohibited. And it doesn't mean that if you change your mind about that meat eating instinct, that it's then wrong for you to eat meat. What Paul is really getting at is the true purpose of the law was not to give you the list of what not to do. Yeah, sure, some of them are phrased that way, but that wasn't what it was about. The intent of the law was to teach you how to think about the things that you do. Thou shalt not do murder. That's intuitively obvious to all people that you shouldn't murder people. But the instinct behind it, as Jesus later clarifies, is don't get angry towards people. Don't bury anger in your heart and let it fuel a fire towards somebody. When it says thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, yes, don't literally sleep with your neighbor's wife, but more importantly, keep your eyes on your own prize, right? Keep your eyes on your wife or your husband, right? This is the idea here, is not to give you a prohibition on what you can't do, but instead to use that as a guide to show you what you should do, what you should strive for, what we can possibly become if we have right calibration. That's really important for us to understand. This is probably the most valuable thing that the Apostle Paul ever left us. Hey, why are you clinging to the what not to do's instead of holding on to the possibilities of what you can achieve and what you can grow into? That's where our focus should be. Not only did the people in Paul's time not really understand that, I don't know that we get that today. See, we've built up our society around this idea that failure is bad. We've stigmatized failure so that you don't ever want to make a mistake. And if you do, we will make you pay for it. What Paul is saying is stop that. We can bring this dusty old story forward, and I can say to us, hey, stop worrying about what's wrong and what's screwed up and what failed. Worry more about how do we get better? How do we grow out of that? How do we move past it? Instead of assigning the blame for what happened and the fault, identify how we can make it better. Be responsible for carrying that ball forward instead of just seeing where it got dropped. That's the message of Paul. That's my exhortation to us for this weekend and beyond. Don't focus so much on what went wrong. Don't cling to the laws of men that are temporary and shift with the winds. Be free in Christ to chase the purpose that's in your heart, to chase the growth that just comes naturally to you. And I hope that that has meaning for you. I hope that that challenges you and gives you something to dig your teeth into this weekend. And may God pour out the blessings of motivation and excitement about where we can go and tune down the glances of what came before. And I love you so, so much. Have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you Monday.